Hello and welcome to another Magic the Gathering video. Today I'm going to be doing an analysis on another deck from the M14 core set. This is the Psychic Labyrinth deck. So this is a white-blue deck, predominantly blue and with some white cards. The foil in the deck, if you're buying the proper paper version of the deck, is Jace's Mindseeker. So let's have a quick overview of the deck and then go into a bit more detail after that. So we've got 16 islands, 9 plains, 3 Show of Valors, 2 Seacoast Drakes, 3 Coral Merfolk, 2 Master of Diversion, 1 Solemn Offering, 2 Scroll Thieves, 3 Claustrophobias, 2 Frost Breaths, 1 Divination, 2 Warden of Evos Isle, 1 Glimpse the Future, 1 Staff of the Mind Magus, 1 Archimancer, 1 Water Servant, 1 Clone, 1 Rod of Ruin, 2 Stonehorn Chanters, and 1 Jace's Mindseeker. So one of the advantages of doing a virtual analysis like this is I can sort the cards in lots of different ways. So firstly, you'll notice this is just sorted by mana curve. And the one big thing you notice about the deck is there are no 1-drops. Let me just switch to mana curve view and you'll see this better. So the pink here is what they call the average mana curve. And you can see this deck is the blue. So we have nothing of 1 mana. We have a whole load of 3 mana things, which we'll come back to in a moment. So just bearing that in mind and just looking at other ways of grouping stuff. So let's just, while we're on the subject of mana curve, just look at other ways we can analyze the deck as a whole. Let's just have a look and see what type of things we've got. So, for instance, we've got 20 creatures and we've got 15 non-creature spells. So that's 5 instants, 3 sorceries, 5 enchantments, and 2 artifacts. So what's happening here is, again, and this is not unusual with a core set. With core sets, I think pretty much without exception, there's probably been a few, like anything, there's probably a few exceptions, but generally with core set intro decks, the primary theme is it's creature based with utility which is specific to the colors in question. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you were playing, say, a blue deck, in blue there's always the option to have a control deck that isn't quite so creature heavy, but it being in a core set, you tend to find that the vast majority of the deck is going to be creatures, and the spells, the non-creature spells, provide a utility which complements those creatures. And they're not really necessarily a win condition on their own, although they can do things that would obviously result you in winning the game. We could also look at this from the point of view of the set, and that would be rather boring because in actual fact, and this is fairly typical with a core set, all of the spells come from M14. It's not like when you get an intro deck from a expansion set where it's going to be, the cards can be from the current expansion, but also whatever still might be standard legal at that time when the deck was produced. What other cards that were standard legal. Rarity, again, not over generous with these intro decks on rare cards. We've got 1 each of Jace's Mindseeker and Clone. Very good card, Clone. We've got 12 uncommons, 21 commons, and 25 lands. So just going back to the mana curve, because this is probably the best one for that. But before we do that, let's have a quick look at the colour breakdown. So we've got 8 white cards, 25 blue, and two colorless, two artifacts here. Okay, so going back to the cost here. So, like I said, we have this problem. There's no 1-drops here. We go straight into 2-drops. So what have we got at the 2-drop level? So we've got basically in here there's 8 cards, 3 of which are instants, and they're all Show of Valors. So Show of Valor is a pump spell. It gives a creature, target creature, +2/+4 until end of turn. So of course it has to have a creature to act on. So in effect, although this is playable on turn 2 in terms of the mana cost, it's not going to do anything unless there's a creature in play. And because there's no 1-drop creatures here, the first creature you're going to be able to play it on is a 2-drop. So, and there's no mana acceleration. So not surprisingly, this card, with the best will in the world, providing you got one of these sort of 2-drop creatures down on your turn 2, wouldn't be playable until turn 3. It is an instant, so you can do interesting combat tricks because you can sort of play it during combat and play it. Also, you can play it on a an opponent's turn, stuff like that. So what creatures have we got? Well, we've got a Sea Coast Drake, which is a 1 and a blue. It gives you a 1/3 with flying. We've got the Coral Merfolk here, 2/1 for 1 and a blue. Not a particularly powerful card, doesn't have any special abilities, it doesn't fly, doesn't pass the so-called vanilla test. So the vanilla test would be, a vanilla creature you would expect to have 2/2 for a cost of 2. So anything better than that, or that has a good ability on it, is better. Anything that has that is worse. So what you'd be first of all looking for, I think, in this deck, even if you're just thinking about changes early on, is maybe, or well, most certainly taking out these Coral Merfolk and replacing them with something more powerful, maybe that has useful utility. There's several ways you could go with that. As I've said, one is to swap it out with something that was a bit more, had better power and toughness, but was still a 2-drop. Maybe you would want to swap it out for a 1-drop, so you did have some 1-drops in the deck. So you could play your creature. It could be on turn 1, could act as a chump block if you wanted it to. But then you could Show a Valor on turn 2, and then you'd have a 3/5 basically. But equally, you might want to just leave that with a creature that was maybe more like the Sea Coast Drake in that it had flying. Or you could go for an easy option and just increase the amount of Sea Coast Drakes, pull all your Coral Merfolks, and then stick in an extra Show of Valor. If you wanted to just stick with the theme of the deck but make it a bit more consistent and more powerful. Then moving on to the 3-drops, you'll notice in this particular slot, a lot of these have reoccurring themes on the abilities. So there are 3 creatures here and then a whole load of utility. So we've got Master of Diversion, which is a 2/2 for 2 and a white with a tap down ability on it. Allows you to tap down a target creature for a defending player. So this only triggers whenever Master of Diversion attacks. You have a Merfolk in here, Scroll Thief, and this is a 1/3 for 2 and a blue. On it, with its ability, you get to draw a card if it does combat damage to a player. So the damage has to get through to the player. And then we've got a flyer here. It's a 2/2 for 2 and a blue. And its ability, which obviously improves it, is the fact that when this is in play, creature spells with flying you cast cost 1 colourless less to cast. It also has flying on it. So the rest of the 3-drop cards are all utility stuff, again revolving around apart from Solemn Offering is basically artifact enchantment destruction with life gain. But the other cards repeat this sort of card draw theme and tap down. So we've got Claustrophobia, which when it enters the battlefield we get to tap an enchanted creature, and that enchanted creature doesn't untap during its controller's end step. Frost Breath, it's an instant, so we can tap up to 2 target creatures, and those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. So with this, timing's really important as to the maximum benefit you're going to get out of it, because the spell only lasts for a particular or until a particular point in the game, that being the controller of the creature, their next untap step, the next untap step. Divination gives us card draw. Glimpse the Future is interesting in that we get to look at our top 3 cards. Unfortunately, we only get to choose one of them, and the rest have to go into the graveyard, and that's unfortunate in that there's only one other card that allows us to interact with the graveyard and get it back, and even that we can only get back an instant or sorcery card into our hand, and that's Archamancer, which when it enters the battlefield, that's the ability that triggers on it. And it's this one of these staffs that we're seeing in M14. So this is life gain whenever you cast a blue spell or an island enters the battlefield, basically. So that's our 3 drops. Our 4 drops, as I said, Archamancer, we got one of those. Water Servant, interesting ability, and because you don't, this is just a straight pay blue mana. If you've got more blue mana, you can basically do this multiple times. So you get to pump this in an interesting way, and what I mean by that is you can either increase its power at the expense of its toughness, or round the other way, increase its toughness at the expense of its power. And each one of those costs a blue, and like I said, you can pay more to do it more than once, basically, if you have enough blue mana spare. Clone's interesting because, of course, this allows you to take control of it doesn't take control. You clone a creature, but it can be any creature. So you're making a clone either of one of your creatures or your opponent's creature. Rod of Ruin is really, to me, an odd card in this deck. Does damage, pings at an opponent. It's 4 colorless to cast, and then you have to pay 3 colorless to deal 1 damage to a target creature or player. You could use it to finish off anything with 1 power, 1 toughness. You could use it to finish off a player if they got down to very low mana. But cards like this only ever work in a deck, I think, where something else triggers as a result of you doing damage to an opponent, or a particular mechanic gives you some advantage by you doing damage during a turn, basically. Then we move on to our 5 drops. So we've got another flyer, Messenger Drake. Again, our card draw theme crops up here. Air Servant has flying, and our tap down theme crops up here. For 2 colors and blue, we can tap a target creature with flying. Illusionary Armor is a pump spell. There's 2 of these. You can enchant a creature, gives it 4/4, but it's a fragile armor in that if this enchanted creature becomes the target of a spell or ability, you have to sacrifice Illusionary Armor. Hence the fact it's illusionary. Stonehorn Chanter, 4/4 for a cost of 5 colorless and a white. But for 5 and a white, Stonehorn Chanter gains vigilance and lifelink until end of turn. And then Jace Mindseeker says this is a 4/4 for 4 and 2 blue, so fairly high cost for 4/4, 6 mana. It's got flying on it though, and its ability when it enters the battlefield, it's really interesting in that you're milling your opponent, so they put the top 5 cards of their library into their graveyard, although there isn't really a viable mill theme in this deck which you could use to kill your opponent. But those cards that are going into the graveyard, you can cast as instant or sorcery from anyone among those cards without paying the mana cost. So again, what you're doing is this sort of theme of exploiting an opponent's resources, which you will see in the form of clone, where you can clone a copy of any creature, so you could be cloning an opponent's creature, and also things like claustrophobia. So in terms of the ideas that are presented in the insert that they give you with the deck, there's 3 cards that they mention. One is domestication, so another card that enables you to control a creature. Very flavorful card this, in that the actual ability makes sense with the name. So what it's implying here is that any creature that has power 4 or greater is going to be difficult to domesticate. So you're only going to be able to control it until the beginning of your end step. If the enchanted creature's power is 4 or greater, you have to sacrifice the domestication, and therefore the creature is no longer domesticated. If it's a smaller creature, then it does stay domesticated. Windreader Sphinx, a 3/7 for a cost of 5 and 2 blue. It's got flying. Whenever a creature with flying attacks, you may draw a card. So it's going to give you card draw later in the game when you're going to need it, because you're going to be, at that point, late game, you're effectively top decking. So it gives you card advantage. Although it has flying, the power is fairly low, so you'd have to hit it quite a few times, or hit your opponent quite a few times to actually finish an opponent off with this. But again, you could use it in combination with, say you still had that Show of Valor. That would work. Pump it. And then Azorius Charm. So this is a white-blue charm. Again, it has stuff that is relevant to the deck. So it's got some lifelink. There is a little bit of lifelink in the deck, although not much. But the more important abilities here which complement the deck. You've got card draw, or you can bounce a creature, put a target attacking or blocking creature on top of its owner's library. So again, this concept in the deck of depriving your opponent of resources in some way. So there you have the Psychic Labyrinth deck. In addition to the ideas that they give, obviously, people want to do their own modifications. So as I've said, one thing to do is look at the cards that are already in there, and are there cards that are in themselves strong and useful in the deck and could be increased at the expense of removing something else which isn't as strong. Other things you could do is move creatures around, add creatures that are maybe lower cost mana to rebalance this slightly lopsided mana curve, which could result in you getting a lot of damage early on before you have a chance to do anything useful against an aggressive deck. And then another thing to do is to basically sit there either with some sort of card filtering tool that you can use to filter off stuff, or you can sit there with the Gatherer, and you can basically filter down creatures to find out what best fits your mana curve. So for instance here I've just got it filtering down white, anything with white or blue in it that's a creature, and I've organized it by cost, so I can maybe use it to find some useful 2-drops that maybe complement some theme that might already be in the deck, or maybe something that doesn't necessarily complement a current theme in the deck, but its particular mechanic might complement the deck in some other way. And so you can see there's sort of quite a few, it's easier if I do this, quite a few choice of creatures that are available to us. It's a really interesting time this time of year in standard. What I mean by that is when the core set comes out, you would have 2 blocks available to you. So now it would be, at the moment, it would be Innistrad block and a Return to Ravnica block. You would have the new core set and M13, and that would be like that until October, when the Innistrad block rotates out, the core set, the M13 set, and we're left with M14, Return to Ravnica block, and the first set from the new block. So you get a real wide variety of choices of cards. The biggest choice that you can get for the time of year in terms of Magic releases. The other thing that's useful to do is to go through the Gatherer, which is Magic the Gathering's online database, and look up cards in a similar way. You can do searches on various aspects of cards and just see if there's something that would fit in with the deck. The other useful thing is, particularly if you're not used to evaluating cards, is you can in here, let me go back to this one, you can look up and see what people are saying about the card and whether there's suggestions for alternatives. So there you have it. There's also online, you can obviously check out the original description on the Wizards website, which will explain to you how basically the deck works. And as you can see, they're saying things that tapping down blockers, and basically tapping down serious threats, locking down creatures, and then as the game progresses, you build up this sort of flying army, which allows you, if your opponent isn't using flyers, to basically fly over and do direct damage. Okay, so there we have the Psychic Labyrinth deck. Thanks for watching.